Hello, hello. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the TMI show, Ted Manila Information Show, where we, of course, bring you too much information. Today, we're doing a slightly different format than we ordinarily would because there literally is too much information to get to in a 30-minute interview segment. So we're making it a full hour with, of course, one of our favorites. Our friend Mark Sleboda is joining us. He's in the virtual backstage. We're going to pull him up here in just a minute. Reminder, whatever platform you guys are watching on, please make sure to like and subscribe or follow, depending on, if it's YouTube or Rumble. And if you're listening on the RSS feeds, we appreciate you being there. And please do share all of this content to help us grow our little channel. We are around 100 days old at this point. So we still need your help.
You're making me feel old.
We're almost 100 days old. We need your help to continue growing this program and making this a thing. So come on, get at it. Click like, click subscribe, and we can keep bringing you unique information that mainstream media doesn't do. We're live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead. Ted, if you want to introduce our guest, I'm going to pop him on.
Let's go ahead and do it. Good morning, Mark. Just bear with me while I read through the intro here. The big deep freeze in U.S.-Russian relations seems to be going through a very quick thaw. Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump talked for about an hour and a half yesterday, according to Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, as well as according to President Trump on Truth Social. The call was lengthy and highly productive, Trump said on Truth. We discussed Ukraine, the Middle East, energy, artificial intelligence, the power of the dollar, and various other subjects. They agree that they want to stop the millions of deaths taking place in the war with Russia and Ukraine, Trump added. Just an interjection here, it's really hundreds of thousands of deaths. Announcing an immediate start of negotiations to resolve the Ukraine conflict. The two leaders discussed the Middle East and Iran's nuclear program, agreed to meet in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and then to visit one another for state visits, presumably Trump going to Moscow and Putin going to Washington, D.C. So this is obviously, for people who've been following the effort to isolate Russia diplomatically and economically for the last 3 to 4 years and before that, this is just absolutely staggering news. What's next for Russia, the United States, and Ukraine? Mark Sleboda is joining us to talk about it. He's an international relations and security analyst. Follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sleboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic, with the C and a K, with Mark Sleboda, and get him over on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, Gramsci. Mark, thanks for joining us here on the not on the final countdown. On the
retread. Ted Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI show.
That's right.
I have to say, with that list, the length of conversation between Trump and Putin and the length of topics they discussed, I'm only slightly surprised that the results of the Super Bowl and how obviously the Chiefs should have won. And who has the superior beer didn't come up.
That's the United States, clearly.
I don't drink beer, so I'm not going to come.
And I do like me a Russian beer, but it's more about the power than the taste. Let's put it that way.
By the way, guys, there's breaking news just as we were bringing Mark on. According to BBC, Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken to them, and he is trying to project strength right now, and he is saying that he will not accept any peace deal that's agreed upon by Russia and the U.S. without his involvement. So
he'll be involved. He'll sit out in the hall while the big boys discuss what's going to be done. And then, by the way, that's what happened at the, in 1919 at the Paris, at the treaty, when they negotiated the Treaty of Versailles over a lot of months. The great powers sat down with cartographers in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. And they had all the little guys wait out in the hall to see, what their borders were going to be, or even if they were going to have a country. And this is true. They literally forgot about Kurdistan. I mean, there was just so much drinking going on. And it was like, we'll catch you next time, bros. And here we are 100 years later. So that could happen. Zelensky
Not
will be involved.
But
he'll hear all
just
about it.
a year ago, we had a situation where Russia was not invited to supposed peace conferences, right?
That's right.
That were to the Kiev regime, all the NATO countries were there. They tried to rope and dope third world country. I mean, the global South and third world countries, China, India. They tried to get these Brazil. They tried to get the BRICS countries to attend, and at the last one, they're like, well, Russia can come. They can sit out in the hall, and when we've all decided the terms, then we'll invite them in and present them with it, right? So, I mean, quid pro quo. I mean, that's the situation. I mean, first of all, the fact that there has been a telephone conversation between the Russian president and the American president after an absence of 3 years, when at times we have literally been a hair trigger away from World War III, right? With the U.S. firing ballistic missiles into Russia, right? In the final days of the Biden regime. We can't talk about how positive a step that is. Even if we get no further than where we are now, they're talking to each other. The intelligence agencies of both countries are talking to each other. There has already been an exchange of prisoners or a deal for an exchange of prisoners. The Russian prisoner is evidently going to be released in the next few days. The American prisoner in Russia, Mark Fogel, was released a couple days ago. But I mean, these are already incredibly positive steps, and it has led, to a degree of panic and horror and terror in both Kiev, Brussels, Berlin, London. Take your pick. They're just aghast at this entire thing. There was a column out by you're probably both familiar with the name Roland Oliphant, who has been a rather anti-Russian journalist for many, many, many years, but a piece out in the British press this just in the last 24, 48 hours, saying that this is Trump and Putin's world, and that Europe and Ukraine are just left out in the cold and no longer a part of the conversation, which, I mean, if anything is to be settled, right? If there is any chance, forget peace. If there's even a chance of de-escalation, then that's the way it needs to happen, because Europe is still many European leaders. We can't speak in the total because there is Orban and Fico and possibly soon Gorgescu in Romania. But many European leaders are absolutely committed to continuing this conflict, and they, I mean, French and Danish fighter jets were just sent to Kiev regime over the weekend, right? I mean, not useful ones, right? Old junk they were about to decommission and get rid of, but still, that's been a long story of this conflict. So I think these are already incredibly positive steps. Again, there is still a long way to go towards a peace settlement. What is going to happen? They're already talking about scheduling a summit in Saudi Arabia, which is, at least as far as this conflict goes in recent relations, a neutral country, agreeable on both sides in this affair. A good pick, another good pick would be the UAE, but Saudi was obviously the pick. But they are not going to be signing a peace agreement at this summit. They may be talking about it, right? But this is something that the negotiations, whether they go somewhere or not, are probably going to be lengthy affair, right? And at some point, yes, the rest of NATO will have to, I don't know what to say, be brought into this, but be brought to heel. I mean, if anything is to be settled, and the Kiev regime too. And it becomes far more problematic with them because Putin has already multiple times pointed out that Zelensky, as far as the Russian government goes, and he's basing this off of the Ukrainian constitution, an illegitimate leader because his term expired last year, and he is only maintaining power through continued extensions of martial law.
Of democracy, Mark. You said it wrong.
As far as I'm concerned, there hasn't been a legitimate leader in Ukraine since the Westback Maidan Putsch in 2014, with all the political parties representing East Ukraine and all the leftist parties in the country banned, all critical media banned and taken under government control. I mean, all the leaders of the major opposition parties, even one of the pro-Maidan parties, Poroshenko, the candy oligarch who led the Kiev regime before Zelensky, they've all been charged with treason for not being loyal to Zelensky's regime. And so, I mean, there is no politics, even much less democratic politics within the Kiev regime. It really is a tin pot Banderite fascist dictatorship. So
we're right here at the, about to see the kickoff of the Munich Security Conference, where obviously there was this horrific, apparently terror attack, the car ramming thing that happened. I don't know how close that is to where the conference is being held, but we've already heard the new Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, yesterday, before Trump revealed that the phone call happened, say that there is going to, at a NATO conference, say that there is no NATO for Ukraine. There are no pre-2014 borders for Ukraine. And the U.S. is going to stop funding this war campaign. I would say that's kind of dictating, no?
First of all, I'm not so sure about the last one there. I'm not so sure that I got the last one out of that. That the U.S. is going to stop providing funding.
I didn't hear that either. I don't think that.
Yeah. Well, because Trump said it. Trump said that it doesn't make sense for us to keep funding the war.
He did say that. He did say, but he wasn't specific about like a
timeline. These are really nice words. This is the Russian position. Those are nice words. Right. Those are nice sentiments.
No. But my question is, what about these our so-called NATO allies? I mean, how do you think they're going to respond to, this, I would say, underwhelming SecDef that has come into office? But you know what? He just shot both pistols out, poo, 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 pew, pew. Yeah. And he's like, this is what's happening from Washington's side. Is that going to bring NATO to heel? Are they actually, or are the NATO allies going to be like, no, we're going to keep supplying whatever to this little dude here acting as president in Ukraine?
Yeah. Obviously, the rest, leaders, other European leaders of NATO, Olaf Scholz in Germany, although he has a very limited time span too, it must be said.
Yes.
Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom. Macron in France, who probably also has a very limited hang time.
Correct.
And very contested power.
Yeah.
But certainly Poland, the Baltic states, Scandinavia, none of them will agree to any of this, right? Just Keir Starmer just reiterated over the past 48 hours, the Prime Minister of the UK, that Ukraine's rightful place is in NATO. So obviously they're on two completely different pages there.
But they don't have, but they're writing checks that they can't cash, right? I mean,
absolutely, but they can also wait out Trump.
Weapons to
Trump is gone in 4 years, right? I mean, that's the way they look at it.
Eternity for the Ukrainians. I mean, I think
it is an eternity for the Ukrainians, right? But a war can always be restarted. I mean, they're already the NATO leaders. If you listen to Mark Rutte, if you listen to European like von der Leyen, they're convinced that they will be at war with Russia in 5 years.
I think they're high as hell. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Zelensky sees the writing on the wall. He's already preparing his Swiss bank account, Cayman retirement plan. I think this is it. He sees it. He knows it's over unless Trump like drops dead and JD Vance has a different idea. It's over.
Yeah, I don't think JD Vance has a different idea, but I'm not so sure it's over yet. I mean, I think that's really, really premature because I still can't see any way that any U.S. president can agree to Russian terms, and Russia will obviously not agree to American terms.
Well, let's talk about those terms.
Well,
my theory about what these terms look like are as follows. First of all, I think we should talk about Trump's desire. I've never heard of such a thing. Trump is the U.S. is Ukraine's ally, principal supporter militarily and economically, and yet it is asking for reparations from Ukraine. It wants we want $500 billion in rare earth materials. This isn't Russia asking for them. We want them. And as Manila pointed out before we went live, all those goodies are mostly in the Russian occupied territories anyway. So how does that all look? It's very strange.
Yeah, this whole thing is this idea that the Kiev regime couldn't be put in hock to Trump for rare earth minerals. This is all just fantasy. I mean, there's no reality to it whatsoever. And here's the thing. Rare earth minerals are actually not that rare. I mean, you could say they're uncommon, but it's simply a matter of where they're found. Is it practical and profitable to extract them in quantities sufficient to make money? Because the process to extract them is the most awful and destructive strip mining of ground of land that is imaginable. You have to filter huge amounts of earth through chemical processes to extract even a moderately profitable amount of rare earths. And this has not been done for decades now, right? Since rare earths have been identified as valuable for high-tech purposes. So first of all, you're right that already a majority of the deposits of rare earth are already in territories that Russia controls. And the rest of it is in territory that Russia will almost certainly soon control, certainly in the next half a year. So that's false on that accord. And the idea that these can just be, that it's money in the bank on these things, that's not necessarily true either.
It reminds me a lot of Dick Cheney's idea that Iraq was going to pay for the price of its own invasion. We saw how that worked out. Energy prices,
or Mexico paying for the wall.
Energy prices, gas prices have skyrocketed and never come back down to where they were anywhere close. But Mark, so I mean, my theory is, I mean, I know I'm jumping ahead in your view, and you're skeptical about this. So let's stipulate that. But I think what we're going to end up with is something that looks like this: no NATO membership for Ukraine. Both sides agree that they're not adversaries. Ukraine is free to join the EU if they should so want as an economic union. The Ukraine recognizes the annexation of Crimea. Ukraine does not recognize the annexation of the Donbass, but accepts it tacitly. On the map, it remains in Ukraine, but in reality, it's like Kurdistan in Iraq. It's administered separately. It is part of Russia. We all know the reality, but there's like one of those dotted lines on the map. And that's how this stays. I think that's where we end up. What do you think?
Okay. Yeah, that's absolutely 100% reiterated multiple times from President Putin to the foreign minister, everyone on down. Those are completely unacceptable to Russia. None of those conditions are acceptable to Russia. None.
Russia's going to compromise some, even though, I mean, they're the victors. But like even at the end of World War II, the Japanese got the right to keep their emperor after they'd been nuked. I mean, the loser does get something, right?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know that that's necessarily.
What's the lovely parting gift?
Yeah, I don't.
The gift bag.
Russia is not in a forgiving mood, and they are winning too much. First of all, let's address the NATO thing. The U.S. the U.S. Secretary of Defense says, as a result of this settlement, it is not practical or realistic for Ukraine to join NATO. Okay, that is a world away from any type of guarantees that Russia will accept as a commitment that both the Kiev regime in Ukraine and the United States can be held to into the future, because they're not looking for a cessation of hostilities for a year or 4 years or anything like that. First of all, neutrality was already enshrined in the Ukrainian constitution up until the U.S. backed putsch in 2000.
Yeah, but the Ukrainians were apparently crossing their fingers when they signed the Minsk Accords.
Okay, so how is Russia to trust any of that? After both rounds of Minsk Accords were codified in a UN Security Council resolution, and Western countries never intended to fulfill them and just use them as time to build up the Kiev regime's armies.
If I were talking to President Putin, I would say you have a different American president to deal with. You have a different set of facts on the ground now.
But Trump is gone in 4 years. Russia can't just rely on Trump. Russia has to look into the future. When Trump came into office, he pulled out of the JCPOA the first time around. And if Trump signs even a treaty, let's say there's actually a treaty formed where the U.S. promises, pinky swears, that it will never allow Ukraine into NATO, what's to stop the next U.S. president from just pulling out of it too? How do you convince Russia that they can trust after so many treaties have been pulled out of, after so many treaties have been abused, after all the deceptions from the February 21st agreement to the two Minsk Accords to the Istanbul communique? How is Russia to receive any type of codified guarantee?
Putin and Russia and his advisors have obviously considered that question, and
yes,
they're still willing. They're obviously amenable to a diplomatic solution.
To talk. That's all they're willing to do. But they haven't budged an inch on their demands. First of all, the Donbass is a part of Russia. What's more, according to the Russian constitution, which is not something that Putin can politically walk away from, the Kherson region and Zaporozhye are also part of Russia. They are regions of the Russian Federation. There is no political climate. There is no political position to walk away from those. It's impossible. And at this point,
Trump can explain all about how American presidents ignore a constitution. It's super easy.
Trump, maybe American presidents ignore their constitution.
Yes, they do.
This is if Putin walked away from that, he would be declared a loser, and he would never. That would be the end of Putin's power in Russia. That is the political climate in the country right now. He can't. It's a position. First of all, they've never given any indication that they will walk away from that.
Well,
it has to be said.
I still think they're gonna, if they have the facts on the ground recognized, for the first.
Kherson City and Zaporozhye are still in the Kiev regime's hands, right? The two biggest cities in those regions. So, and Russia taking them is still months away. Let's talk. If anything is to be signed with Zelensky, right, and with a Ukrainian leader, there have to be elections in Ukraine, quote unquote elections.
Well, Trump has
those will take months to carry out, right? Months. It's not something that can happen next week. The conflict continues until then, because Russia has said again and again and again, there will be no ceasefire until everything is settled. No ceasefire. Because every time we give you a ceasefire, both rounds of the Minsk Accords, Istanbul communique, you just use it to rearm and retrain.
Everyone postures, right? Everyone's a badass. Everybody's pushing, saying, "Oh, I won't compromise." But in reality, people compromise. History shows that.
I do not see, after how much repetition of these conditions, how firm Russia has been, how much Russians have sacrificed for this conflict, and the dangers still going.
Think about how firm Zelensky has been. We will not even talk to that son of a bitch. It would be illegal. I will arrest myself if I talk to Putin.
I'm going to have to beg to differ, Ted. – Putin is not Volodymyr Zelensky.
Well, true. But yeah.
I really don't see.
And they both hold very different set of cards.
Like where Russia might, I would think it would be a huge mistake. Where Russia has some room for compromise is on the demilitarization of Ukraine and the denazification, right? Which, in truth, neither of those can be fully committed without complete regime change in Kiev and probably up to the Polish border, right?
Yeah.
They could require a denazification law, like all the Banderite
absolutely. All the Banderites would have to be lustrated from Ukrainian politics, like the Kiev regime did to all of the opposition politicians that were opposed to it when it seized power in 2014, right? The glorification of Stepan Bandera and Shukovich and other leaders of the organization of Ukrainian nationalists and the Ukrainian insurgent army that were Nazi collaborators in World War II would have to be forbidden by law. All of these sorts of things. All of these armed formations, Azov, these militant groups, but also their political movements they are now teaching Ukrainian children in school.
They'd have to be banned. Yeah.
Yeah, that would all have to be banned, right? And Russians are very hot on that.
I think
you would have to have
that's a reason. Honestly, from over here, people don't get it because they have been propagandized. But if I were Russia, I wouldn't settle on that. I would need
Mark,
that.
One of the viewers, Adrian, asked you a question. I mean, you've largely answered it, but he did say that Pete Hegseth, has said painful concessions will have to be made on both sides.
No,
Adrian
they don't,
wants to know,
because Russia's winning. They don't have to be made on.
Adrian wants to know, what concessions do you think the U.S. has in mind for Russia? And obviously, will Russia agree to them? I think the answer is no. But what do you think the U.S. is gonna try to, I don't know, twist Putin's arm into before Putin says no?
Yeah, see, I think this is all a trap. I said this when Trump was first elected, that it would probably be better for Russia in the end result if Kamala Harris had been elected. Because the one thing that will keep this Banderite fascist regime in Kiev in power is a deal pushed by Trump. That is the trap here, right? That is the only thing that can keep this regime in place.
Trump claims that he's demanding elections, that Zelensky stand for elections, and we know that.
What do elections mean in Ukraine when all the opposition parties are banned and all the opposition leaders are charged with treason?
Well, that would have to change.
So if we replace Zelensky with a committed Banderite fascist like Zelensky, how is that any better? That doesn't help Russia in the slightest. There can't be any elections in Ukraine that are any way fair or democratic, even approaching it, while this regime remains in power. That's the truth of it.
So you don't think there's going to be any sort of formal talks that include Ukraine, that formal or trilateral talks rather?
Sure.
Because
yes, I think talks will definitely happen, and they will go on for months and months and months, and there will probably, in the end, be no real agreement. Yes,
Mark, I normally agree with you. I don't think
I'm optimistic.
I think you asked me what the plan that the U.S. was going to try to push on Russia, and what you just said is the plan that the U.S. would like to push on Russia, and that I don't believe that, and I've never heard any Russian official in any way suggest that any of that is acceptable to Russia at this point.
Yeah, but I mean that's obvious. That's that's posturing, right? I mean,
no, I don't think that's posturing at this point. I think Russia has gone through and suffered and endured too much. Just NATO, right? A promise from the U.S. that they won't bring Ukraine into NATO is not enough. They also have to promise no Western military bases in Ukraine, that West doesn't train Ukrainian troops, that the no Western missiles are placed in Ukraine. It's not just NATO, no de facto NATO either. No, none of what has happened for the last.
Yeah, I mean, Russia can get other concessions too. They can say we don't want missiles in Poland, right? Pointing at us.
That is where they're probably willing to make concessions on. The demands they made in 2022 about the rollback of NATO to the to the 1940s. That is where they're willing to negotiate and compromise on at this point, right? The Polish and Romanian bases of the U.S., the expansion of NATO,
and
to
Trump's happy
include
to
the
do that.
Baltics. Yeah, Trump is. To do that. But those are the things that Russia's actually willing to compromise on.
And
not
they'd be very
Kherson,
useful. They'd be very
not
useful from a
Zaporozhye.
long-time perspective. I mean, look. I think everybody's got a strong motivation to talk here. That's why I think people are so optimistic here. Everyone wants to bring this in for a landing. You've got a great opportunity here. These two guys, this is kind of like when Reagan met Gorbachev, and he said, "I can do business with this guy." These two men can do business, I think.
Absolutely. Everyone wants this to end. Everyone wants to talk. I'd agree. But as always, it's the details, because everyone wants this to end on their terms, or terms that are acceptable to them. And Russia's terms, and what the U.S. imagines walking away from this with some type of face-saving position, are a world away.
Well, that is also an argument, right? I mean, Trump can tell Putin, listen, you got to give me something for my domestic consumption. Otherwise, I'm going to have my ass
because
kicked.
This is a Biden war.
I've got neocons.
Trump has positioned it that way.
Here, right? And
Trump has positioned it that way, even on the campaign trail, that this is a Biden war. He's, said multiple times over and over that this probably would have never happened under his watch. And I think, a couple of days ago we covered this, that Vladimir Putin was playing into Trump's ego by saying, yeah, maybe, and maybe the election was stolen.
By agreeing that, like, the 2020, Putin said that, poor Trump, the election was stolen from him in 2020. Right. That's the only thing that Putin said that made
playing
me
the ego. I'm gonna pop our producer Robbie in here as well, because I know he's got a couple of questions and perspectives that he wants to present to Mark. Sure. Producer Robbie, there you are. I'm gonna reposition this. Go ahead and start talking. I'm gonna start moving some boxes.
Oh, sounds good. In this situation, I got to admit, I am Team Mark. The esteemed producer of the TMI show is going to respectfully disagree with Ted Rall.
Team Russia Hawk. Let's go Team Russia Hawk.
Well, I mean, like what you said, Russia's winning. So why does the victor concede anything? That makes no sense. Abraham Lincoln did not concede anything to Jefferson Davis in the war between
Russia. Around 100,000 Russians have died in this conflict so far, many of them by U.S. weapons. Yeah. The Kremlin is willing to talk, but they are not willing to sacrifice their terms and goals for this conflict so that Donald Trump can save face domestically in the U.S. That is a conceit that does not concern the Kremlin at all.
Every loser gets something in a peace negotiation, and
you can keep your bases in Poland and Romania. That's the concession.
The Confederacy got the right to be reintegrated into the United States and former Confederate soldiers were not tried as traitors, and they were allowed to come back and be. I mean, that was a concession, right? That's not something that the Union wanted to do. I'm just saying.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about that at a different time, but I think that one of the questions I have for you, Mark, and you touched on it a little bit before, does a guarantee that Ukraine will not join NATO, does it matter if Ukraine if the Ukrainian army continues being retrained and retooled to NATO standards? I mean, it's
de facto NATO. No, de facto NATO is not enough. No, absolutely not. That is not acceptable to Russia. The only troops that Russia will accept in Ukraine as part of a peacekeeping mission are Russian troops, right? No European troops where they take the NATO hat off and put the EU hat on, right?
How about that's not acceptable. White helmets.
Well, how about your North Korean troops? I mean, they're already there anyway, right? Can't the North Koreans come in? I mean, wouldn't that be viable? Now, my second question: do you think that that Putin will push to have the SWIFT sanctions revoked?
I don't think is a priority. Honestly, Russia removal of sanctions is actually not a Russian priority. I know the West thinks the leverage that
I would like for that to be a priority.
Personally, I would like that.
Yeah, but it's not here. We get along fine without it, right? The Russian economy is growing. Russians' average salaries have increased.
But it's
Russia's
not like it's not like those sanctions are helping, right? I mean,
No,
Putin
they're
would
not.
be happy to see them.
No, actually, no. There is an argument to be made that a lot of the growth that Russia has experienced is a direct result of the sanctions, because Russian oligarchs and businessmen have been forced to actually reinvest money in the country and Russian businesses over the years. And all of that substitution of goods that previously came from Western companies, most of it, some of it's import substitution with BRICS countries and the like, but the majority of it is now done by Russian manufacturing, Russian agriculture. These businesses are booming. So there's actually a very good economic case to make that the strong Russian growth that continues is not despite Western sanctions, but actually because of them.
So you don't think he's gonna? But I mean, Trump. I mean, obviously, Putin will ask, right? Hey, do you mind?
I don't know if Russia really wants to make itself vulnerable to that type of financial and economic leverage again. I don't.
Well, I mean, you can get the sanctions lifted, and then you don't have to give up BRICS. You don't have to give up your new relationship with China. You don't have to give anything up. Nothing bad happens as a result.
Well, Trump sees the alliance between Russia and China as a geopolitical threat. So I think he would want that to. I don't see 100%, and I think that's something that Trump would insist on, that the relationship between China and Russia comes to an end, which would be
good luck with that.
Suicide. Yeah, he can't.
Yeah, that's Russia, not going to happen.
Russia cannot and should not do that.
No, they absolutely will not.
So I'll go away so now you smart people can talk.
No, you're welcome to pop on any time. Yeah, obviously, there's a map I'm showing here of all the neighboring countries that are, can potentially make any long-term or lasting peace difficult, I guess, to say the least, right, Mark? Yes. You got some neighbors
right now. There's a lot of talk in Russia that the Kiev regime and the Baltic countries are prepared to are well along the way of the preparation of a false flag event in the Baltic Sea to try to force NATO into war against Russia. Right now, they have recalled their citizens. They've told their citizens to come back to make sure they're in the countries before the borders close. They've cut themselves off from the electrical grid with Russia and Belarus that they had previously been a part of. Russian intelligence has warned that there is a plot to blow up a ship, effectively, and blame Russia to try to block the Baltic Sea and then stage a provocation with Russia. If you think that the European countries that want war and the host of people that still are the absolute overwhelming majority in the U.S. blob are just going to accept Trump making at least a genuine attempt to de-escalate the situation with Russia, that they're just going to let that happen and not try every dirty trick in the book that they can to stop it, absolutely they will.
I believe that. I just don't they'll try. I just don't think it'll work in the long run or in the middle run. Let's talk about Iran. I know the two men, there's been reports that Israel is planning to launch a military attack on Iranian nuclear industrial facilities. That Trump does not want that to happen. He's trying to convince Israel not to do that. They're meeting. Should we make anything out of choosing Riyadh as the site of a summit? As of course Saudi Arabia being the biggest and most powerful Sunni Muslim country and the biggest enemy of Iran, the biggest Shia country. Is that sort of like a leaning on Iran? Trump has said he wants a deal with Iran. He wants to be friends with Iran. He just doesn't want Iran to have a nuclear bomb ever. That's the one thing he doesn't want. And the implication was that Iran could possibly even be reintegrated into the Western system if they agree to that. Is this part of the Trump typical thing? Like, let me lean on you hard and then cut a deal?
I mean, if you want to say, like a Trump madman theory where he goes in with all kinds of bluff and bluster,
yeah, like
and
he did with the Truth Social from a few weeks ago when he was saying like Ukraine, Russia had better settle, and then here we are.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say another thing, along with its relationship with China, that Russia will not sacrifice to Trump or to any future U.S. administration, is its relation with Iran. And that has just been solidified in a new, deepened, and strengthened strategic partnership that it is widely assumed will see Russia build up Iran's air defense and electronic warfare network to prevent exactly such an Israeli and U.S. attacks on Iran, although that will take several years to come to complete fruition.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting part, if you go into the details of that strategic partnership, is also that Iran doesnn't build nuclear weapons, right? That Russia provides a conventional
It doesn't
deterrent.
want nuclear weapons. Iran really doesn't want them.
It has been pushed to the point where it is reconsidering that.
Right.
It has. There have been conversations at the highest level in Iran.
Out of fear.
Yeah, out of fear, right? Out of pushing. But so first of all, Iran and Saudi Arabia are not the Shia Sunni grand enemies that they once were, right? And negotiations that China brought to the end, but that were put forward by many different countries before that. China, Saudi Arabia, and Iran have restored diplomatic relations. They've gone a long way. It's not to say that they're bosom buddies, right? Or anything now, but Saudi Arabia has walked away from that position that the U.S. has pushed them to decades of this U.S., Israeli, Saudi, tripod hegemony against Iran in the region. Saudi was not so interested in that anymore, and just walked away. I think so. Israel has already been talking about attack on Iran's nuclear facilities for months and months and months now. And the truth of that is that it appears that Iran has at least, if not a greater capacity for long-range strikes against Israel than Israel has against Israel has against Iran. And Israel can hit, particularly if they have U.S. help, which they would probably need for airstrikes against Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran can turn right around and bomb, launch missiles at Israel's nuclear facilities, right? I mean, Dimona nuclear power plant, where Israel builds its nuclear weapons. If Iran launches a few hypersonic missiles, which they have, into there, Israel would have a very bad day. They're a much smaller country. They can't absorb, radioactive, blow like that. So
Mark,
I think a lot of this is bluster.
What about Russia's position or friendship, or I don't know, the relationship between, Putin and Bibi, and especially this precarious position with the Middle East being in the same neighborhood, we'll say, with parts of Russia, right, where it concerns them, obviously with Syria being overturned and, led by a new delegation of head choppers there who have rebranded and changed names even for part of the rebrand. I've heard that the Russian talks about maintaining their bases in Syria did not go over well. So it seems like Russia is running out of places in the Middle East where they can park their jets. How do you see this relationship shaking out between Putin and Netanyahu? And obviously he's going to have to protect his country's interest by way of Iran.
Okay, so first of all, Putin and Bibi, Russia and Israel, for the last few decades have had a pretty good business relationship where they can do business with each other. But that has really, transactional. That has really suffered over the last few years, right? As Netanyahu gets crazier and crazier, and the geopolitical blocks, nascent blocks have solidified, that relationship has really suffered. In Syria, I really don't see Russia keeping those bases there. It's obvious. So Turkey played the largest part in overthrowing the Syrian government and putting Al-Qaeda, let's be honest, Al-Qaeda, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in its place, right?
Sure.
Putin had a conversation with the leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who is styling himself as the president of Syria now. And Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is still recognized in Russia as a terrorist organization. Literally, every time you write Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, by Russian law, you have to write Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is a terrorist organization recognized by the Russian Federation. By the way,
And
the
also
U.S.
by the
also
United States.
recognizes them as a terrorist,
Exactly.
as does the United Nations,
Right.
but that's neither here nor there. So that shows Russia's level of practicality. But Erdogan put them in power, and Erdogan wants the Russian bases to stay there, one, to try to keep Russian-Turkish relations managed, and two, but also as a hedge against the U.S. and Israel, which are still both in Syria. However, does Russia want to give long-term leverage to Turkey and Al-Qaeda over them by having bases in that territory? Whatever benefits those Syrian bases, I don't think are worth it. Russia is working on new bases in Sudan and Libya. I think they're going about a slow motion business of at least preparing to evacuate those bases while waiting, on a definitive, let's see where things go. But I can't see them, if Hayat Tahrir al-Sham continues to be in control of Syria. And they've said there will be no elections, not for the foreseeable future, right? So, I mean, there's
Sure.
I mean, that would be a joke.
They said 3 to 5 years is the latest.
Yeah, but it's a bad situation in Syria. I think both Turkey and Israel have bitten off far more than they can chew, and Trump looks like he once again wants to try to pull U.S. troops out of Syria. That didn't work so well the last time.
Mark, let's talk about the Middle East, about Gaza. Russia has long been a supporter of the Palestinian cause.
I recognize Palestine as a state, yes.
And this history goes back to the Soviet period. The sympathies are deep. Is there going to be discussion about Trump's plan to annex and ethnically cleanse Gaza between, Putin obviously has thoughts. So what if any, what's the dynamic there? I mean, does a Ukraine deal, is that related at all to what happens in Gaza, or is that just a separate side issue?
Yeah. That's going to be a separate side issue, right? Obviously, Russia opposes it and will speak against it, right? But it probably will not be much at Putin's level, right? It's something that will be delegated lower because there's too much of a priority with the whole Ukraine security architecture, nukes in Europe, that sort of thing, right? Russia's position is obviously they would be horrified and aghast and would oppose any type of openly, but let's be honest, the ethnic cleansing of Palestine has been the policy of every U.S. and Israeli president for decades, right? It has just been a slow motion ethnic cleansing of one house, one settlement bulldozed at a time and replaced with Israeli settlers, colonists brought in from U.S. and European and post-Soviet countries. Now they're just on an accelerated timetable, the U.S. president just normalized the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from Palestine and is making it out to be some type of real estate deal / humanitarian operation. It's absolutely obscene. It's absolutely obscene. But Russia's not going to push much on that issue. I think the Russian position has got to be where our priority now, particularly now that Syria is gone, everything is laser focused on Ukraine, a little bit maybe on Moldova and some other countries, but everything in the near abroad. And if the United States wants to permanently destroy its diplomatic relations with the entire Islamic world by carrying through with this, then let them make their bed in line.
Let me point out that El-Sisi of Egypt has already preemptively canceled his trip to D.C.
He's holding
over this.
stronger than I thought he would. He is, yeah.
I have a quick question for you, Mark. You're talking about Turkey just a minute ago. Do you see any way that Russia could use the bad relations between Greece and Turkey to its advantage? Like,
I don't think that's actually that important right now. No,
Gotcha.
I mean it's just not a hot button issue even for Greece and Turkey, right? I mean it's something that both continually have on the back burner, but
Gotcha.
for both countries have far more important domestic and other things. I mean,
Gotcha.
Erdogan is suffering through the growing pangs of his new nascent neo-Ottoman empire in Syria and parts of Iraq right now, and he's got far too much on his table. He's already bitten off more than he can chew there, I think.
Gotcha.
So,
I'm just wondering if he could leverage, if he being Putin could leverage the Greeks cause trouble to help him keep his bases in Syria, or it just doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. It's not that important.
Gotcha.
I think they all like to continually fight over Cyprus. It's just like it's something a topic you can continue to talk about at the dinner table.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
not a hot war or anything, though. I mean,
right.
It's a war of words at this point. I mean, it's just
even Greece and Turkey. It's more a war of words that is, it's brought out like an argument at the Thanksgiving table that happens every year and gets trotted out again and again.
Yeah.
But
And another thing.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And also, you took Cyprus, asshole, dick.
Yeah.
I really think that's how this stuff works out. Now, circling all the way back to this perfect phone call between Putin and
it was the
Trump.
best phone call, the hugest phone call of all time.
The biggest. It was a 90-minute phone call. So I think, like, if we examine just that alone, just based on the length of the call and the broadness that, the topics that they allegedly covered.
When you have to speak through a translator, 90 minutes isn't actually.
Well, that's true.
That's true.
There's also implications, although Putin can speak English, right?
Yeah, he's a
He
polyglot,
can speak
right?
a little English, but he certainly would not speak English to Trump, even on the phone, right?
Right, because you want to make
maybe
sure
as
every
a
detail
few
is
words in a side when they're with each other, but on the phone for an important phone call like this, absolutely not.
And they may have spoken before, right? Like on the DL.
Sure.
We don't. There's implications to that.
Yeah. I don't think that they have had a phone call before this one. I think there's been a lot of rumors that they have since Trump was inaugurated, or even before he was inaugurated. I think this is actually the first phone call that they've had. I mean, I know Trump was playing coy and trying to say an if, and I don't want to say and everything, but I don't think that they've actually.
They were talking to each other through the press, though.
The messaging was very warm. I mean, even talking about how the U.S. Soviet alliance during World War II, the shared
or like coming to each other's countries. That's a big deal.
It did make me laugh when Trump implied that the U.S. had sacrificed as much in World War II as the Soviet Union had. It's like, you got to check out those numbers, dude. Not even close. But I thought it was very. I mean, and the word that jumped out at me was from Trump's statement that he's interested in a partnership with Russia. I mean, you don't get closer than that.
Yeah, that's the whole. There is a within the MAGA geopolitical viewpoint, if you want to identify as such, there is a a long trend, a long held belief that they want to partner with Russia and turn Russia against China. I mean, that's long been a fantasy within the MAGA movement, within the geopolitical thinkers close to Trump, if you want to call them that, which I really don't. But anyway, so I think that when he talks about a partnership, that's probably really what he's.
And Mark, do you think there is any way, like we know obviously that Trump is a lame duck, and I know Putin has signaled that this last go around might be his final go around as well as president, and so beyond them, if a peace deal is eventually agreed upon, and there will be, I think, at some point, right?
Yeah.
Maybe not immediately,
Sure.
but a peace deal and even some sort of friendship agreement, if you will, for a lack of better term, they've got to come up with some sort of framework that we know
They'll
takes
friend
months
each
and months
other
and
on
months.
Facebook. Yeah.
Right. They'll make it Facebook official. They'll become friends and all of that. What kind of framework can you imagine that these guys can hammer out that can live beyond their terms in office? What is
Great
is there
question.
anything that can be done to ensure a lasting peace especially between the US and Russia? Can there be a long-term détente rather than this shitty end of the Cold War from the 80s, and then 20 years later we're ramping up Cold War anger and hate once again? I mean, is there any way a framework that can live
Such
past
a good
these
question.
two?
Yeah, and John Mearsheimer was asked a very similar question in an interview just this week, right? And I really, owe a great deal of my perspective of the world and international relations to Mearsheimer and Mearsheimer's books and so forth. And he says, I don't know if there's a way that a settlement, a broader security architecture can be codified between the Trump administration and the Putin administration that will last and will hold. I don't know what that looks like. He doesn't know, right? And I don't know. Again, so many treaties that the U.S. has walked away from, so many deals. I mean, the ABM treaty, the Open Skies treaty, right? That Trump himself pulled out of, the New START treaty, the Short Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces treaty, the February 21st agreement in Ukraine in 2014, both rounds of the Minsk Accords, the JCPOA with Iran, the Istanbul Community. How can Russia possibly trust any piece of paper to make it slightly more valuable than something to wipe your butt with? All right? The only way is with facts on the ground
and neutral,
reality,
and there has to be mutual self-interest, right? I mean, the United States
are the Europeans too, right? I mean,
it has to be tasty
conceptions
for the American
national
leaders.
interest change, though, because the conceptions of Trump administration's national interests are vastly different than any other U.S. president in living memory, and Trump will be gone in 4 years.
Right.
But Russia has a lot to offer the United States.
Though.
I mean, just think about the energy resources alone, right? I mean,
like Mark, the Europeans have to play into this as well, because like I said, if this is the next 4 years with Trump, there needs to be some sort of framework, a friendly framework that involves everybody. And when is the European view of the Russians going to change, and their rhetoric? When is that going to change? Are the Anglo-Saxons going to be any different than the Western Europeans? Or are they going to continue to all hate Russia?
Yeah, I don't see any change for at least a generation. I mean,
wow.
These things are set in. They're set into the narrative. They're set into the mindset. This entire generation of European foreign policy elite have been mentally colonized by U.S. neocons. I mean, Burrell, von der Leyen, they quote Robert Kagan chapter and verse. The whole garden in the jungle spiel, that's literally ripped from Robert Kagan's book titles, right? Robert Kagan, the arch neocon, the husband of Victoria Nuland, right? I mean, this generation of European foreign policy elite, I mean, with some obvious exceptions.
The Adam and Eve of neoconservatism, as it were, Mark.
Yeah. This messianic supremacist ideology of exceptionalism has spread from the United States to Europe in the last few decades in a big way. That's why Russia is like, we can't even talk to these people. Trump, at least we can talk to, right? But I mean, talking to von der Leyen is like talking to Kamala Harris, right? I mean, it's just impossible. So I don't see that changing for the most part anytime soon.
By the way,
we all hope that there might be some radical change in European politics, but unfortunately, even in the crumbling political systems in France and Germany, things are still aligned to keep radical shifts in foreign policy impossible by all the rest of the crumbling hegemonic parties uniting together to prevent Le Pen from coming to power, to prevent the AfD from coming to power in Germany. And, you know, it may take another 10 or 20 years possibly for a real change in those countries to finally unseat that hegemonic triangulation of power in these primary European countries. I mean,
Mark,
we've seen radical changes in Hungary and Slovakia and possibly now in Romania and Austria, but these West European countries, it's a little more solidified.
Mark, let me ask you about the difference here between the first Trump term and the second Trump term are palpable. It seems clear that Trump was interested in friendlier ties with Russia when he first came into office in 2017, but that was rapidly derailed, and that those dreams went away. And basically, the idea that put Trump was close to Putin, was just existed in the fevered mind of SNL writers, but not in reality at all.
The Russia Gators.
Things got very cold very fast. Obviously, I mean, this is different, right? Or it seems different. Is this likelier to stick, and if so, why? Or if not, why not?
Yeah, it's different. I absolutely agree. It is qualitatively different. Trump obviously doesn't have the guillotine specter of Russiagate hanging as an impeachment threat over his head. Trump is obviously much more in control of the Republican Party. The successful confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard, which I have to say I did not expect and was wrong on.
Me neither.
Indicates that he has considerably more grip on the Republican Party, right? And power leverage against, Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins, and they're afraid of him, right? Second of all, what Trump wants more than anything right now, he is engaged in a war against the U.S. deep state, right? Against the you want to call it the blob, the permanent bureaucracy, what you want to call it. He is engaged in a heated war with it right now. And U.S. aid is just the most visible tip of that iceberg. He wants to fight that war, right? That war is his priority that he would like to focus on. And that's a far more dangerous war for him, of course. But right now he's got momentum. Right. There's a lot of things that are going to end up in the Supreme Court. A lot of things are going to end up in the Supreme Court. But don't think that Russia and China and Iran and other countries aren't aware of that and will be trying to milk that and take advantage while the Trump administration's, primary interests are inward looking rather than outward looking. I certainly would. If I was in the Kremlin, right, I would be trying to take advantage of that. And it's not to say that he wants to replace it with a pro-multipolar worldview where the U.S. tries to find a constructive place in a new multipolar world. No, he wants old school imperialism where the Western Hemisphere is mine. Greenland, Canada, Panama are mine. That is his vision, his grand strategy vision. That's not necessarily better for the world or us or Americans than the policy of U.S. led Western global hegemony, but it is different, right? it will have many of the same characteristics. There'll be some overlap, but there will be differences too. And can it last past the next 4 years? Can Vance, continue on the Trump legacy and cement that type of foreign policy view change into U.S. politics?
Unless, of course, don't forget, Mark, there is the notion that Trump could finagle a third term.
I mean, we could proclaim him the God Emperor of mankind too. I mean,
there's this scheme where they would flip the ticket. Vance would run for president and promise to step down in favor of Vice President Trump. Exactly.
Yeah. I think that would actually be not doing J.D. Vance justice, because that man is formidable. I don't agree with him on a lot. Right? But he is a formidable politician. He is sharp, right? I regard him as formidable in a same way that I regard Tulsi Gabbard as formidable. But I actually like Tulsi Gabbard. Again, I don't agree with her on everything, right? But I think that is the single most shining moment of the Trump administration thus far. Is the confirmation of Tulsi Gabbard.
Oh, it's tied with
every
RFK.
time.
Totally.
Yeah, every time the U.S. National Security Council meets and these neocons like Rubio and Waltz and others are Hegseth are whispering in Trump's ears, Tulsi Gabbard will be down the other end of the table saying, hey, don't see what I know what you're doing.
Knock it off. That's what I expect. She
will be arguing with them to her, in the face. And I think that is so important. I think I still have this warm, completely unexpected smile that is imprinted on my face by the fact that Tulsi Gabbard, who was put on a politicized terror watch list by the last administration, is now the director of national intelligence. The CIA and the NSA report to Tulsi Gabbard.
That's amazing. Yeah. That is absolutely amazing.
That alone might be worth it. That's everything.
Yeah, I'm curious. I cannot wait to see how this shakes out and how those guys have to, like you say, report to her specifically. And the fact, personally, I'm thrilled that she's a woman, a second woman in charge in that position behind Avril Haines, who was the last one. But Avril Haines was a CIA swamp thing, right? Like when she was spooked to the core. This is a totally different animal. Tulsi Gabbard. I mean, I disagree with her on many topics, but when it comes to just being a little more fair and balanced towards who the so-called U.S. enemies are, she's the fairest of them all.
And understanding the realities of American foreign policy in its recent history, right? I mean,
yeah. Without agreeing with her on everything, you really can't expect any better from the United States. That is just phenomenal.
Yeah, this is great. And I wonder if this is going to be her path towards running for office again.
Don't knock on wood. Don't say it out loud right yet. Don't do that.
I know, super early.
Don't jinx it.
I would say no, because you know what? In American politics is very unkind to people who switch parties. If you switch parties,
let's see her
you are
survive
never trusted
the next
again,
4 years as DNI.
Let's
literally survive the next 4 years as DNI.
Yeah.
Let's see. Mark Sleboda, always appreciate you coming on, and thank you for making extra time because we knew there was just so much to unpack, obviously. So we appreciate you rushing home.
And there's so much we didn't get to.
Evening. Yeah, and there's still so much we didn't get to, but I mean, we chipped away as much as we could. Thank you so much for taking time for us. Mark Sleboda, of course, is an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter, which we still call Twitter, at Mark Sleboda1, the number 1. Check out his YouTube and Telegram channel called Realpolitik with a CK at the end, Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda, and also on Facebook. And Substack with the same name, Realpolitik with a CK.
Realpolitik with Mark Sleboda. Yeah, the branding makes some consistent sense. Yes.
Great. And then facebook.com/Gramsci. Always have a good time when you join us, Mark. So thank you so much. This is like just I don't
Thank
know.
you, Mark.
I'm personally happy. I'm happy that the
Ted,
talk has
Ted
begun.
Manila, having a long conversation with you again, it's like an old family meeting. It's very nostalgic.
Totally.
It gives me
is.
a warm fuzzy too.
Me too.
And then we spiral into talking about like new wave music and Devo's coming over here to DC.
Yeah, no, they're playing in New York.
Duran, baby, Duran.
I've met them. They kept the hair in the early 2000s.
Old school cartoons too. Don't forget those old school cartoons.
That's right.
Cannot forget
Thundar the Barbarian.
That's it.
Thundar the Barbarian.
Yep.
Thank you, Mark. We'll look forward to having you back again.
Bye,
Cheers,
Mark.
everybody.
Thanks. Hello. Happy Monday, everybody. Good morning. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rall. You are tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show, otherwise known as the TMI Show for short, because we do bring you too much information. Let's be real. Today, we're going to do a little different of a format because we're bringing our buddy Mark Sleboda on for the full hour because, Ted, I think the full hour is warranted around this whole crazy Oval Office explosive meeting. So I think we need that time. And then, as I predicted on my Friday podcast, Ted, that Zelensky was going to go rapping on the doors of 10 Downing Street immediately after this. And sure enough, he was there.
And of course, the Elysee Palace.
Elysee Palace went to 10 Downing because, you have to go kiss the ring at
they
wherever Zelensky takes it. It's I guess. And yeah, 10 Downing's nowhere near as impressive as the Elysee Palace.
No,
nowhere near.
It's decidedly anti-impressive. I mean, I think that's that's sort of the point, right? It's sort of like,
is it?
Yeah, I think that's with whatever. I mean, the English do everything in a very considered way, and it's not an accident that 10 Downing Street is
true.
very unassuming. Yeah.
That's true. Of course, our friend Mark Sleboda is backstage. We're going to bring him on right now. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button, and also follow Mark's channel. I'm going to pop him right on. Hi there, Mark.
I'm going to set us up though and introduce Mark. So, Mark.
Yeah, let's properly introduce.
Give me 45 seconds here. All right, so let's dive into the latest developments in the Russo-Ukrainian conflict, spotlighting that fiery news conference between Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday. Let's get into the contentious exchange that unfolded in the White House, where sharp words and clashing agendas left the nation and the world buzzing and Europe on edge. Trump and Zelensky are at each other's throats. Let's see what it all means for the conflict's trajectory. European leaders are rallying or scrambling in response, trying to figure out what to do. Is this new breakdown a shift in U.S. policy, or is Trump just being Trump? Let's look at the effects across NATO and the EU. And there's probably no one better to talk to about this than Mark Sleboda. He's an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at MarkSleboda1, at his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with the C and a K with Mark Sleboda, and get him over on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, GRAMSCI. Thanks, Mark, for joining us on the TMI show.
Ted, Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the TMI show.
So, Mark, did you watch on Friday, or did you watch the playback, or did you watch every news feed on every social media website ever in the world that all they talked about on Friday was this meeting?
I was not watching it live. All right. I first saw some clips, and then I saw some more clips, and then I saw the 10-minute clip. And it wasn't until the next day that I actually watched the entire 50 minutes, which I think are crucial because I changed my initial assessment.
Totally.
Of what
I went through the same exact process as you did, Mark. Go ahead.
But I think we can safely sum it all up and simply say censored for YouTube. It was a feces show, right? It was a big stinky feces show. Yeah.
Big steaming pile, Mark. Big
My initial assessment after just watching the 10 minutes, right, that a lot of people saw was that JD Vance and Trump were tag teaming Zelensky in what seemed a very comfortable way, and that this was a setup, right?
Yep.
That this was
like an ambush.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of the Western media went with.
SNL went with that.
In the aftermath.
Yes.
But when you watch the entire 50-minute show,
Totally different.
And I call it a show because it was, prime entertainment. Let's be clear about this. This might have been the best performance of Zelensky's life.
Better than a Nora, let me tell you that.
In a comedy role, right? Better than Servant of the People. That's for sure. If you've ever seen
I have
his show where he played the president of Ukraine before he became the president of Ukraine. After that, it became clear that actually for the majority of this lengthy conversation, all conducted in front of the press and largely to the press, 40 so minutes of it was more or less amicable, right?
Especially the beginning.
Unusual.
Sure.
Yeah. But in this last 10 minutes, Trump had even said, we're going to take one more question and then we'll go. And they were going to go out and sign or this quote unquote mineral deal nonsense, this political gesture. And then they were going to have lunch and there would probably be a second press briefing. That was it. And Zelensky would have been out of there with having papered over a lot of the tension that had been building between the
and he'd have a full stomach. He wouldn't have missed lunch.
Yeah, I saw the menu. It didn't look that great to me. But anyway, it was reported right afterwards, that because the lunch was not going to be eaten by Zelensky, the White House staffers would eat and enjoy. So that's where I saw the menu.
I hate to see wasted food. That's just my mom talking to me.
I agree.
Yeah. No disagreements. Yeah. So, but it was clear that Zelensky just couldn't keep his mouth shut, right? And went off starting in on JD Vance and arguing with him largely about the diplomatic course that the Trump administration was set on, arguing against it in terms where he tried to run over, tried to speak over both the vice president and the president, in succession, and voices grew increasingly louder, and eventually he was kicked out. And the disrespect, he was acting like the literal enfant terrible, right? Like the terrible infant.
A bratty kid.
We say enfant terrible in France.
I don't speak froggy, so
grab up.
You'll have to forgive me.
Speak American, Mark. He was acting like a bratty kid.
A spoiled brat, a petulant, spoiled brat. He has such a sense of entitlement. He threw a tantrum. He was rolling his eyes. He was sighing, right? Anyone who has a 14-year-old has seen Zelensky.
He was petulant. That's if you don't know what petulance is, I point you to this video.
That is it. And the whole suka bliat.
Oh, okay. So there
under his breath. Oh God.
Yeah. So in English, there's about 7 curse words, right? And you more or less hear them in every school playground and every single Hollywood movie, right? In Russian, swearing is quite different, right? Swearing, there is a high intensity, verbiage for this. It's called mat, right? And it is so much more offensive and intensive than cursing in English that you really can't believe it. And what's more, there's so much of it. There are entire dictionaries of mat.
So
right?
it's like having 100 words for snow if you're Inuit.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's more than that is, while it is considered offensive, it is also considered kind of an artistry to swear creatively and profusely, right? It's a big thing in Russia. Again, it is something that you never expect to hear out of your politicians' mouths. I mean, even with the changes in the modern day, it is considered foul. My wife won't let me learn any mat. I mean, she's dead set again. She'll swear in English like a sailor. And having been a sailor, I can attest to that, right? But if she catches me saying anything, and suka blyat, right? How to for the YouTube censored office. Under his breath, when J.D. Vance started arguing back to him, he muttered in what you can hear something, right? If you are a native Russian speaker, which, by the way, Zelensky is, because he swore in Russian, you hear him, you hear and you can see what he said. And suka blyat is essentially saying he was a female dog engaged in prostitution, fornicating crassly. Is that that's what he called
effing B.
Yeah, there we go. Effing B.
Effing B.
What's more than that is he also, even when he was talking out loud to the vice president, he referred to him as JD.
Yep.
I caught that.
Right?
That's how it all started. What diplomacy are you talking about, JD?
JD.
Yeah, JD. Right? And he's in the Oval Office, right?
Yeah, but he's wearing his best Henley. So, there's that.
Okay, so there was a whole lot of context that set this up. Okay, so
basically I'm dressed like the president of Ukraine when I go visit the Oval Office. I'm ready right now. You can send the Escalade to pick me up. I can go visit Trump if I'm Ukrainian.
Is your shirt made by a neo-Nazi outfit in Ukraine?
No, to my knowledge, no.
Then his clothing is, by the way.
I know.
Right.
And the logo.
Yes.
Yeah. So the logo he was wearing was just the trident of Ukraine. And
but that has fascist
connotations. It does. It's controversial, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would accept that as being separate in the modern day if it hadn't been for the Maidan, right? If it hadn't been for the Maidan, all right, you can get away with it. But since then, everything has become tainted. And he was wearing all Banderite fascist black, right? I mean, that's true. And his face got red enough to add some accent. So if we rewind about a week, what was going on here? So Trump wanted to push a diplomatic course demanding a ceasefire and bring this conflict to an end. Really, what he was doing is he wants to save the Kiev regime. I mean, literally, that's what he's doing. And no one else on the Kiev regime itself, the Europeans, they don't want to admit that they're losing this conflict.
No, that's exactly right. Some of the bitching that I've seen from the pro-Ukraine people on social media is like, and also from officials is like, well, we shouldn't give Putin everything he wants. It's like, well, when you lose a war, the victor tends to get everything that they want. I mean, that's how this works.
They are losing, but they don't want to admit it, right? And they will continue fighting, I believe, till the end. I don't ever believe.
What is the end, Mark? What does the end look like? Like the
it looks like the occupation of Kiev and probably Lvov. And then there will still be a guerrilla war afterwards.
Yeah, you and I disagree on this, but that's okay.
Yeah, we
Putin doesn't want that, right? I mean, he's never
No, he doesn't, but he doesn't have any choice.
Isn't it like
He
a,
has
isn't it, yeah, but I mean, in a way, like there's been reporting about 9 days ago that inside the White House, there was a desire to fire Zelensky, basically, that they're done with him, that, Zelensky's in the way of a peace deal. It's not just a matter of the Russians not wanting to deal with him. It's more of the fact that it's just like what Trump said. You're not ready for peace. You're not ready to talk. You're not serious. You can't you won't make a deal. You're not willing to compromise. You think that nothing's changed. And he's like, well, this guy's unreasonable. So we can't have, and obviously he has, his take on Putin is that Putin is comparatively reasonable. So he's like, I've got one guy who's ready to talk and I like where he's at. I got the other guy who's not willing to talk. So let's get rid of him. He's a pain in the ass anyway. He's an arrogant little pipsqueak. And let's get someone else, some other Ukrainian who can, who's willing to make a deal. I think it's that simple.
You think that's simple? How do you do that? And who replaces him?
Well, I mean, maybe right now, if I'm Ukrainian, not that they have a democracy, small d democracy, but if I'm Ukrainian, what does Volodymyr Zelensky bring to me and my country? The only thing he brings is he can get weapons and money from the U.S. That's it. Well, now if he can't do that, what good is he? I mean, what is the point of him? Like, don't need him anymore, right? Like, go to Como and retire.
People, like their opinion has mattered.
And power brokers in Ukraine. Yeah.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with democracy, right? I mean, this is a regime. Right? It is a Banderite fascist regime.
But even fascist regimes have to have popular consent.
No, they have to have They have to have not active dissent, right? And they achieve that by having complete control of the security,
you can't
military.
Only rule with fear, though, forever. Even Nazi Germany was concerned about public opinion.
Any man who even comes out in public is immediately press ganged, conscripted, and sent off to the front. Which was
I think the first time when Vance mentioned that.
Yes,
that's the first time that information ever appeared on mainstream television.
Yes, I mean we can listen to that if you want. I mean,
it's something that Americans don't know anything about because the Western mainstream
and they assume it's a lie, probably, or an exaggeration or something, or they just sort of like la la la.
Yeah,
didn't hear that.
Like regime, it's all Russian propaganda. Right, every one of the tens of thousands of videos out there of it. Right,
it's completely. I mean, what's maddening to me is how people talk about stuff like this in the United States with great certainty that they know nothing about. Right, but they talk. It would be like if I started like blathering about football, and I don't watch football ever, but I'm like, the so-and-so is going to win, and just making shit up. I mean, it's like we're talking about Russia's going to invade all of Europe. They just want to invade and put the USSR back together. It's like, Russia hasn't been territorially expansionist since the 19th century. That's several regimes ago. It's like there's literally no evidence of this. You're making shit up. You're paranoid. The U.S., on the other hand, has been militarily expansionist many times since then.
Well, look, it's just as bad as like yesterday at the Oscars last night, having Daryl Hannah going on the stage and saying Slava Ukraini. I bet this, gross, right? I bet this woman, this actress, doesn't know the first thing about Russian-Ukrainian relations, the littlest thing about the history, but this is what mainstream media has told her. And because she's a Democrat, that automatically, by default, whatever comes out of J.D. Vance's mouth or Donald Trump's mouth has got to be propaganda in her book, because we know Hollywood is
a lot of it has to do with that.
TDS. So no matter what comes out of their mouths, it's going to be fake.
If Trump embraced kittens and puppies, Democrats would say that all kittens and
puppies
are evil.
Puppies.
Yes, it's
kill them.
For those who don't know, Slava Ukraina, glory to Ukraine, was the slogan of the OUN and UPA, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists and Ukrainian Insurgent Army in World War II, who were Nazi collaborators, responsible for the massacres of hundreds of thousands of Poles, Jews, ethnic Russians, leftists, any Ukrainians who disagreed with them.
Speaking of which, I had someone on my Facebook feed say, "Oh, I sympathize with the Ukrainians because my family's Jewish and they came from Ukraine." I'm like, they came from Ukraine because the locals wanted to kill them.
That's
You
the
idiot.
opposite reason. Yes, it's like the exact opposite reason.
Yeah.
Well, let's listen to the vice president and what he actually said before Saturday Night Live and the Oscars and everybody started twisting what he said.
It's actually a very important question.
We spoke about this in detail with the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, and others at lunch yesterday. And I know that Secretary of Commerce Lutnick followed up in private meetings last night. This is really important. We believe Americans have the right to speak their mind, even if we in this room disagree with them. They have the right to speak.
That was the question about American companies and social media in the UK. So the fire starts. I'm gonna find it right about here.
Want to see if we can get this thing done. You want me to be tough? I could be tougher than any human being you've ever seen. I'd be so tough. But you're never going to get a deal that way. So that's the way it goes. All right, one more question.
I will respond to this. So look, for 4 years in the United States of America, we had a president who stood up at press conferences and talked tough about Vladimir Putin, and then Putin invaded Ukraine and destroyed a significant chunk of the country. The path to peace and the path to prosperity.
Yeah. Notice, J.D. Vance here, right? This is the first time he has interjected in this 40-minute conversation.
Yes.
And he is not attacking Zelensky. He's not even talking about Zelensky.
That's true.
He is attacking the previous administration's policy. He's attacking Biden. And then he's going to go into what we want is diplomacy. And then that sets Zelensky off. What kind of diplomacy?
What is diplomacy?
Well, by the way, I love that whole, you can't, it's like, oh, well, we can't trust, Zelensky says that, well, we can't trust anything that Russia or Putin says. Well, okay, if you say that, then never in the history of the world would diplomacy ever have settled any issue, because you negotiate with your adversaries and your enemies. You don't need to negotiate with your besties. It's like, it's like, well, when Japan surrendered on the deck of that battleship, it was like, how did we know that they weren't going to start fighting us again? Well, we just, they shook hands. They signed an agreement. We assume they won't do it,
That's what it is.
That is actually projection, because, of course, it is the Kiev regime and the Europeans that broke both rounds of the Minsk Accords that had been solidified.
They even admitted that they never meant it. They never meant it. They literally, we were crossing our fingers. We never really meant it.
We tricked Putin into it. Right. Okay, let's finish Vance.
Is maybe engaging in diplomacy. We tried the pathway of Joe Biden of thumping our chest and pretending that the president of the United States' words mattered more than the president of the United States' actions. What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Here we go.
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our big parts of Ukraine, parts of East and Crimea.
Parts of the East in Donbass that had been shelled by Kiev for the past 10 years. But who's counting, Mark?
To quote Robert Heinlein, right? War solves a lot of problems. People say that violence doesn't solve anything. And one problem after 1991 was that a lot of Russians were on the wrong side of that border between Ukraine and Russia. And now that problem is largely solved by this war. Really, truly, if magically Putin and Russia were like, okay, take it back, all of it, including Crimea, then Ukraine has a problem, right? They have a restive population in the East and in Crimea who don't want the Ukrainian government there.
Right.
They're pissed. And they're going to have guerrilla warfare. They're going to have, it wouldn't be good. In a weird way, this does solve a problem for Kiev as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who's counting?
On 2014. So during a lot of years, I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact line?
2015.
2014.
2014 is
2014.
Yeah. So
I was,
he
I
killed.
was not here.
Yeah, but yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. That people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversations.
They're dying because Kiev was
and
shelling.
we signed with him. Me,
Yeah, it's
like
like,
the
yeah, you're
new
the-
president. In 2019, I signed with him.
You're
the
like you
deal.
murder your parents and
I signed
complain
with
you're an
him,
orphan.
Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire.
Pause it.
Ceasefire. All of them.
Pause it. He's talking about a ceasefire affiliated with the Minsk Accords that both he, Merkel, and Macron have all come out publicly and said they never intended to fulfill the Minsk
That's true.
Accords, that they were simply they were playing for time to build up a powerful military in Ukraine. They've all admitted it, right?
They have all admitted
three
it.
of them, including him. And now he tries to present it as we can't trust Putin. Oh my God, that is like
I bet Putin's a
reality.
calm guy, but if he lost his temper, I bet he was throwing things at the TV when he was saying
Guys,
Zelensky was saying that.
This is what the kids call gaslighting.
Yeah.
This is gaslighting.
And told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring people.
I have social
you bring
media,
them on a
is what he
propaganda
says.
tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military?
We have problems.
And do you think that it's
I will
respectful
answer.
to come to the Oval Office of the United States?
Look at
of America
Zelensky's body
and attack
language.
The administration is trying to prevent the destruction of your country.
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future.
Yeah, because
You don't know that.
Putin's coming for New York.
Unless you will not have a war.
Here
Don't
comes
tell
the
us what
silverback.
we're
Well, the
trying to
Russian
solve
food
a
will get a lot better
Don't
in
tell us
Manhattan.
what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because
I'm
you're in no
answering on
position
this
to
question.
dictate that.
That's exactly
Remember
what
this.
you're
I'm
doing.
not
You're
dictating.
in no position to dictate what we're going to feel.
You
We're
will-
going to feel very
you will
good.
feel influence.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you, You
strong.
will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and he
of the
happens
war.
to be right
From
about
the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I
You
was
don't have the cards right now. With us, you
True.
start having
not playing
cards.
cards.
That's
Right now,
undeniable.
You're playing
Serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think
That's
You're gambling
true.
with World War III.
What do you think?
That, I mean,
I
how is
love
any
that.
of that wrong? That
I
was
love
all
that.
true.
When have we
from
ever
Donald
seen
Trump.
an American president express that concern? I mean, yay.
So Zelensky is openly arguing with Trump and with the president and vice president of the United States in the Oval Office in a meeting, right? A public, a what is essentially a photo and press op for the signing of a mineral deal, with the understanding that this mineral deal is what the Kiev regime is going to get in place of explicit security guarantees, which Trump is not willing to provide the Kiev regime, which, by the way, Biden never provided the Kiev regime either.
Right.
Mhm.
And that being settled and giving the U.S. a vested economic interest in Ukraine, no matter how real those minerals actually are and how much profit and wealth there really is there. And the fact that this document is it's a statement of intent. It's not even a real deal, right?
Right, it's a deal memo, really.
It's a political gesture more than anything else. But the idea was in order to go through a diplomatic process that, of course, would result in unfavorable terms, i.e., not complete victory for the Kiev regime. The Kiev regime was demanding security guarantees. What they wanted was a promise. They wanted U.S. and European troops on the ground in Ukraine after a ceasefire. And then if the war just happened to start up again, because I don't know, someone on the Ukrainian side, the Banderites started shelling Russian territory again, right? Then the U.S. would be at war with Russia. This is what they would. This was what this was all about.
False flags, Mark.
False
I mean,
flags.
just like the Chernobyl thing out of nowhere. That oh no, the Russians are bombing Chernobyl.
They've
again.
done it like 3 or 4 times throughout the war.
This is why the U.S. is not willing to provide those security guarantees. So, and Zelensky thought when he proposed this nonsense minerals deal, which first of all, Russia has most of the territory that Ukraine has minerals, and second of all, they've blown Ukraine's supposed mineral wealth out of all proportion and rationality, right? It's not some treasure trove waiting to be exploited there. Now, the terms of this deal are exploitative, right? There's no question about this. But what Trump was saying is you get implicit security guarantees, right? That because America will have a vested interest and because there'll be American workers on the ground exploiting these resources, that no one will dare attack them. Okay, well, that's nonsense. But the Europeans, particularly Boris Johnson, convinced Zelensky to go ahead with this. And also explicit with this deal is that Trump is recognizing that Zelensky is the president of Ukraine, right? Because if he has the power to sign this document, right, you would hear the calls for elections in Ukraine go away, right? Because they just, how could you turn on him after you've just, so this is legitimizing him. This is another thing they were going to get out of it. And the Europeans assured him, right? They said, all right, the U.S. won't give you explicit security guarantees, a promise, but we will play to Trump. We will promise to put our troops on the ground in Ukraine as a reassurance force. And that will satisfy Trump's demand that we have to carry the heavy share of the burdening. But we will demand that for our security guarantees, that the U.S. give us security guarantees, because our militaries are so weak that the Russians would run over them, much faster.
As George Galloway always says, that the UK's military is hardly enough to fill a stadium.
It's a joke. Most people would be shocked at the real state of the British, the French, and the German militaries. They're not even a paper tiger, because even on paper, according to their own assessments and reports and their own medias, their militaries are a joke, right? So they would just be there as human tripwires to then drag the U.S. in. And they said, what we need from the U.S. as a backstop for our forces is we need intelligence, we need logistics, we need air defense cover. We need, essentially, they were arguing for a no-fly zone, which means that the U.S. Air Force would have to divert hundreds of aircraft to Ukraine and engage in an air war over Ukraine with Russia. This is what is all, contained in this, right? And that would be the security guarantee that would draw the U.S. into the war directly, whether Trump wanted it or not, right? And Trump blew off Macron and he blew off Starmer, right? And he wouldn't give them any security guarantees. And so Zelensky here is desperate. He's not getting what he wanted. Macron couldn't get it out of him earlier in the week. Starmer couldn't get it out of him. In fact, Donald Trump asked Starmer point blank at one point, so can you take on the Russians on your own?
Wow.
Cue the room and Starmer giving a nervous laugh. So they thought they were going to snowball Trump here, and Trump was having none of it. And Zelensky was getting panicked and desperate. And he's got this sense of entitlement that says he should get what he wants. And why not? Because for the last 3 years, every time he said he wanted something and he was told no, he'd keep begging for it and eventually would get it anyway. So that's what he did. Only he did it in front of cameras and the press when he had been told explicitly, and the White House has been clear about this, that they were told that this was just a photo op and a signing ceremony. They were not here to re-argue something that has already been settled on. There's not going to be any security guarantees. There is going to be a diplomatic path forward, but Zelensky couldn't let it go. And he tried to guilt trip the president of the United States and the vice president in the Oval Office
and shame him in front of the media.
In the media and the world. And they weren't having any of that. And Trump went into silverback mode, and JD Vance went into attack dog mode, and they mauled him. All right. And it's not the end of the story. And afterwards, all of the Europeans lined up, even as Zelensky went on Fox and said, I have no need to apologize. I will not apologize. They all lined up around him. We stand with you. Be brave, be strong. Right? They all collectively, all of Europe, with the exception, obviously, of Orban and Fitzo, just stood protectively around their petulant, spoiled brat and gave the middle finger to the White House. That's what has just happened.
It was like a diplomatic snap. You go, girl. That was basically what all of the Europeans, like just in uniform, in unison, all tweeted the same thing. So obviously it was a coordinated, effort by all of the Europeans. And by the way, Justin Trudeau, I don't know if he got the memo, but he's a North American. He's not European, but I know he likes to play European because he speaks
I thought
French,
he was the 51st state.
That's true, but it's still North American. He's I get that he speaks French, but he's not actually European. I know he thinks so, but Mark, we got a viewer question for you from Adrian. He says, shouldn't Russia just ignore the theater last Friday and expedite the SMO? Also, what chance?
Exactly what they're doing.
What chance do you think the U.S. will send boots on the ground or air cover?
Yeah. I think that, first of all, let me ask the answer to the last part. Right now, with Trump in office and everything as he has said so far, I think the chance of America getting involved directly now is less than it ever has been, right? If we had Kamala Harris or Biden, right, that would be a different story. But, I mean, it's still not I don't know. I mean, Trump, 1 week he calls Zelensky a dictator, and the next week he says, oh, did I say that? I don't remember saying that, right? So who knows? But I can't see it. With regards to Russia, yes, like Russia is fully aware of this. They are certainly entertained by all of this, but they are not stopping the special military operation. They've been clear that as far as they are concerned, they haven't even heard any peace plan, or there hasn't been any peace negotiations so far, and the Kiev regime is incapable of it. So they're just trucking on, and they are just at the prospect that Trump could end up cutting all military aid to Ukraine. They're like, what's going on, Vladimir Vladimirovich? What should we do? And Vladimir Vladimirovich, taking a page from the Chinese, is shh. We should be quiet and do nothing while our enemies are destroying themselves and doing our job for us, right? That's what's happening. I expect to see big offensives this late spring and early summer. Expect to see moves on Zaporozhye, Kherson City, possibly even Kiev. It's definitely coming. Russia is more set than ever of just taking the whole thing, of uprooting the regime completely. They see opportunity in all of this, and they're going to take it. They're not going to let this regime survive, because if Trump, saved it, if they were sensible enough to let Trump save them, then Russia and Ukraine's security problem would just be kicked down the road. Right?
Well, what about U.S.
fought.
backing and funding? I mean, it does look like, that's going to be severely curtailed, right?
Well, it hasn't as of yet. Nothing's changed.
As of an hour ago, Zelensky was just telling the press that U.S. military aid is still being received in Ukraine, which doesn't mean that might change, right? We're told that the White House is going to discuss it today. But the Europeans have made clear that even if the U.S. stop, they're not going to stop, and they're going to help the Kiev regime fighting, which they're not going to be able to make up for the U.S., but, it will still drag it on for another year and a half, maybe.
Or maybe not. Maybe the Ukrainians will come out of their foxholes and get serious, or maybe they'll overthrow Zelensky and put in someone who's willing to talk.
Bring in Zelensky, who would be a more committed Banderite fascist general.
Right. Yeah. It's not like
or Poroshenko.
But people aren't. But are all the Ukrainians stupid? I don't think so. Right? They must.
No,
they can see the writing on the wall.
Politically repressed. There are no opposition parties. They've all been banned. All their leaders have been hunted down. Thousands of Ukrainians have been assassinated by the regime for daring to not agree with their political course of the country since 2014. There is no organized resistance in the country because there hasn't, they've stamped it out so completely. Anyone who sticks their head up and so much as snaps a picture of one of Russia's drone or missile strikes immediately gets sent to the front or prison or possibly both. There is no ability to resist on the ground. You have to understand how jackboot thugged Ukraine is at this point. Because even if
the Democratic Party, right, Mark? There's no, for example, the Democratic Party here back home, there are no horses left in the stable. They're scrambling right now after the 2024 elections to figure out who's next to bat, right? They don't have anybody right now. So, and there's nobody left in Ukraine that can stand.
There's not even any opposition parties in Ukraine, right? There are only parties.
What about the guy that just tweeted this weekend? I forget his name, but he was calling for new elections and for Zelensky to step down. He's an MP, but is that? I felt like when I read that,
he's an ex-MP and he's in prison.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
I did not know that. Okay,
how's he getting his message out then?
What?
How's he getting his message out?
People do tweet. Navalny was tweeting from prison all the time, right? That does happen. I'm sure now he will not have that access, that he had it before. But people do get their stuff out, right? It was tweeted to his account. It doesn't mean that he typed it,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Well, yeah, because we see locked up political prisoners all over the world.
Yes.
Get their messages out through their people or their lawyers or whatever. How is the PKK leader who's been in prison since 1999 calling for disbanding the PKK from behind bars and tweeting, right? So that's fair. Yeah. I think Robbie had a question also. I think I'm going to pop producer Robbie on there. Robbie.
Howdy. Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different take about this whole theater that happened on Friday. I think that Zelensky knows that politically his goose is cooked when it comes to Trump. So I wonder if the reason why he put on that show in front of the press pool was to get political meat for the never Trumpers, the neocons, and the Democratic and Republican parties to try and force Trump through Congress to continue the support for the Ukraine war. What do y'all think about that?
I don't think it was a performance. Like,
No,
there was what he was trying to argue. And yes, there might have been an intention in the fact that he was arguing to do that, but it was only knee jerk. It wasn't like this was some plan.
I think it was a Hail Mary.
You see the face of the Ukrainian ambassador face palming and crying just a few feet away as all of this is going on. And Yermak keeps stabbing his own hand with his fist as it's happening, right? This was unintentional in what happened. It obviously was. Zelensky he lost it. He lost it. He couldn't control his own sense of entitlement and
I think that's right.
Panic.
Gotcha.
I think that's right. I agree with Mark. I don't think any of this was staged, as even though the mainstream Western press is trying to present it as such, that, you know, like Ted pointed out earlier, that SNL did a whole skit about this, that they, you know, deliberately sandbagged him in front of the press. I don't think that was it at all. I think
I thought that at first, but once I saw the full thing, it became clear.
By the way, there were questions from the press that followed this widely reported exchange, right? It went on. This event went on for quite some time after this explosion. But you could sort of see, everyone trying to normalize things. But Zelensky looked absolutely shocked.
He was pissed.
Yeah. Well, I think he was stunned.
Yeah.
That
all three: shocked, stunned, and pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the most telling thing that I got out of it was there towards the end, Ted just now talking about, was when Trump, when he started kind of revisiting the whole Russiagate scam, and he said, "No, Putin went through all this crap with me. I mean, we were in this together."
But they're doing that now.
No, you can just hear the heads exploding. And so, Liz Cheney this morning, she came out tweeting, saying, "No, we have to stand with Ukraine. No, Trump wants to just bend the knee to Putin." And my whole question, I mean, let's just assume that Mark is right, that I don't know, maybe Zelensky's having cocaine withdrawals, controlling his emotions or whatever. How is Russia going to deal with Luxembourg throwing its support behind Ukraine? Like, is that creating fear in the streets of Moscow?
Actually, I think I've got word right now that the Kremlin is considering an unconditional surrender.
I would think so.
Well, Mark, Estonia's pissed too. So, Putin better run and hide in a foxhole somewhere. Spider hole.
There's an old Russian expression: the dog barks, the caravan passes on.
But I've just asked this question real quick, and I'll jump back off. And I think you had touched on a little bit ago. But do you think that the Russian army will push onto the Dnieper River this summer and maybe to Odessa, or do you think they just keep being methodical?
Yeah. So I think that the Russian military is going to be doing multiple things at once because they're capable of it. Even the Kiev regime is reporting about a 200,000 strong new Russian army that hasn't been committed to the fight yet. Right. So I think you're going to see Russia. The main thrust, the most important, will be taking this last Kiev regime defensive line. First, Pokrovsk, and then Slavyansk, Kramatorsk, and Konstantinovka in Donbass. At the same time, you are going to see Russia very likely move up north from Zaporozhye in the direction of Zaporozhye city. And there's a lot of evidence that they might make a contested crossing of the Dnieper to take Kherson city, right? They've been doing a lot of drills. And that will, first of all, help stretch out already way overstretched Kiev regime forces very far. But Russia has a priority of taking Kherson City and Zaporozhye City because it has declared that Kherson and Zaporozhye are part of Russia. So if negotiations get underway, sometime late next year, right, that gets serious, then they want to already have that settled or close to settled on the ground. But I think you're probably also likely to see something once the Kursk pocket is followed up, is completely rooted out, and that's very close to being wrapped up, right? Russia has the last supply line into Suja practically cut at this point, and they've got Russian forces on the other side of the Ukrainian border there already in Sumy. They will continue on and take Sumy, the city, as well as the region, and then they will march right back in towards Kiev again from Sumy, like they did in 2022.
Mark,
Is Odessa on the menu?
Is Odessa? Odessa's really hard to get to, right? Even in World War II, the Soviet Union went the long way around through Kiev first and then down to Odessa. You would have to first go through Kherson City and then Nikolaev and then Odessa. I mean, I know Russia, there's a lot of Russians that will feel that this is not complete unless Russia gets at least the east of the Dnieper, including Odessa. But it is more likely that Odessa, if it is gained, will be gained in surrender terms rather than through a military occupation of Odessa. The geography just isn't for it. An amphibious assault on Odessa would be so costly. Russia they don't have amphibious assaults are always messy and awful, right? And Russia doesn't have a huge amount of amphibious assault capability. It's never been a priority for them. And you might notice that quite a number of Kiev regime's / NATO's attacks on the Black Sea Fleet over the last 3 years have been specifically against troop transports.
Mm-hmm.
What about the relationship, setting aside Ukraine? It seems pretty clear that Donald Trump really wants to have a good, he wants to warm up relations with Russia, right? Would you say that's fair? So
absolutely. And I think it's important to separate these two things, right?
Maybe so.
Because improving bilateral and diplomatic relations between Russia and the U.S. is happening, and a settlement of the Ukraine is it's not entirely separate, but it is a different course. And one can happen, primarily the first one, without the other.
I guess that's exactly what I mean. That was my feeling. I wanted to get your take on that. I mean, It seems like I don't think Trump's going to let. I mean, I think to me the big takeaway of Friday's contretemps is that there's no longer any need for Trump really to worry that much about Zelensky or Ukraine when it comes to the rapprochement with Russia, because he's getting eaten alive. Trump's getting eaten alive by the neocons and the Democrats in the media anyway, as being like, he's sucking up to Putin. So he's nothing
doing
to
Putin's
lose
dirty
now.
work.
He might as well go for that friendship anyway and get all the advantages that come with it economically and politically.
This is exactly Russiagate 2.0, Mark. I mean, it's been debunked. People know Russiagate is debunked now. I don't think all people. I think people that have really drank the Kool-Aid.
My parents don't believe that. I mean, my parents
really.
A lot of people. Yeah. No.
A lot of people are still there.
No, it's still a majority opinion that's true, even though it's false.
You have people like Chuck Schumer repeating the narrative, saying, "Oh, well, now Trump obviously is doing his best friend's bidding now. He's doing Putin's bidding. Look at him attacking our European allies."
Yeah.
But I mean, this again, they're trying.
Thomas Friedman.
To stop peace.
Thomas Friedman in the Times wrote over the weekend that in the almost 250 year history of the United States, there's never been a European ally treated like this. And and I was kind of like thinking, well, first of all, I wrote for the Wall Street Journal, which they're currently editing my piece. I'm pretty sure they're going to run it about Charles de Gaulle and his relationship with FDR, which was worse, actually. He hated de Gaulle. So I mean, I get into all the details, but yeah, it's like basically this whole like, but this has never happened. Nothing like this has ever happened before. And it's like, but I think at this point, it's kind of, the breakup is now well underway, right? I mean, Trump doesn't have to care about Zelensky anymore.
Yeah, Ukraine has never been a treaty ally of the U.S. And the U.S. regularly spies on, I mean, there was the whole Operation Gladio during the beginning of the Cold War, where the U.S. was directly preventing democracy from resulting in leftist governments in Italy and Greece and other European countries. So, you know, I love the qualifier in Europe because that completely neglects the U.S. throwing the Afghan regime they installed under the bus, the Kurds under the bus so many times that no one can even keep track of, throwing Saddam Hussein under the bus after he had been a proxy that they put in power. The U.S. has
Manuel
a
Noriega.
long history.
Manuel Noriega, don't forget him.
Of tossing its proxies to the side when they're no longer useful.
Yeah. I mean, basically, Zelensky has just been treated like a used snot rag, and he's being tossed aside now.
It is. I will say that the change in U.S. foreign policy that is occurring between the Biden administration and the Trump administration is the most radical change in U.S. foreign policy that certainly in modern history, perhaps in all of U.S. history. He is taking on the blob. He is taking on the U.S. foreign policy orthodoxy, the deep state, if you will. Right? That's his primary war. He's at war in D.C. Against the blob, against the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy, whatever you want to call that. And it is such a radical change in U.S. foreign policy. Nothing like this has happened before. We don't know what the end of it is going to be, but hey, Chinese curse, we're living in interesting times.
Well, Mark, let me, in the last couple of minutes that we're bending your ear, let me ask you about U.S. and the broader EU, real EU, not, and the UK, of course, because they're no longer EU, but barring Ukraine, what do you think this does to the U.S. relations with the other Europeans, including the United Kingdom, when you have Keir Starmer, even though he says he's going to send billions of dollars to Ukraine, and when he went to Kiev about a month or two ago, he signed this 100-year unlimited partnership deal, that's kind of carte blanche. Parliament hasn't even discussed what that deal is going to look like. But what does this do for the U.S. relations with the UK and with the broader EU when these guys are saying they're willing to send boots on the ground in Ukraine? Trump has said, no way, no boots on the ground, and we're limiting funds. But then Starmer comes out and says, right here, he's saying, no, I don't call the U.S. an unreliable ally. When a reporter asked, do you consider the U.S. an unreliable ally?
Yeah, everyone's talking about the damage to U.S.-Ukrainian relations, but there is a huge amount of damage occurring to the transatlantic relationship right now. And we're a month into the Trump presidency? We got 4 more years, right? I mean, I'm not saying that NATO is going to be dissolved and fall apart, but I will say that the way things are going, anything's on the table. Look, Trump hates all the European leaders, right? They all openly sided with his opponents. First in his first campaign during the Russiagate hoax, right? In the second campaign, Keir Starmer and other European countries all deliberately sent agents to campaign for the Biden Biden Kamala Harris campaign, right? They hate him, he hates them, and there's some payback, right? For Trump, it's personal. He's getting some
JD
payback.
Vance mentioned that on Friday.
Yeah.
He mentioned
Yes, he
that
did.
Zelensky had campaigned for Harris in October.
For Harris. He doesn't forget. He's King Elephant now, right?
Why would he
Elephant
forget?
No. And remember when Trump came in the first time, he took a wrecking ball to the JCPOA because it was Obama's supposedly signature foreign policy legacy. Well, the Ukrainian conflict is Biden's foreign policy legacy, such as it is. And I think Biden, in an act of revenge against Zelensky, I mean, it's probably part of his rationale. He does have a foreign policy vision, a grand strategy vision, I think, as well, if you want to call it that. But a lot of it is personal. And he thinks by taking a wrecking ball to this, if he can get away with it, he can get revenge against the European leaders, against Zelensky and the Kiev regime people, and Biden all at the same time.
Well,
Okay.
I think that's what we're witnessing for sure. Is within a month, U.S.-European relations. I'm not going to say irreparably damaged, Mark, because
that's a big word.
Yeah, the Europeans, no matter how much they want to chest thump, they know full well they're not going to get anywhere, or at least very far, without any U.S. support. So they cannot cut off the U.S. entirely. They can talk smack all they want, but
they waited out Trump the first time. They think they can do it again, and they're just praying that JD Vance doesn't follow him up.
Well, see, I was going to say with JD Vance's, if you want to call it a performance, whatever it was that we just saw, I think that secured JD Vance's, the passing of the baton to JD Vance in MAGA world, because the MAGA world, the populists, the people that actually brought MAGA to power, they don't want, external wars. Their foreign policy, the MAGA populists, are more aligned to like that of Ron Paul.
Some of it is. Some of it is. Some of it doesn't.
A lot.
Some of it doesn't care about foreign policy. Let's be honest. Americans do not vote on foreign policy. They never have, and you can say that all polls in the U.S. are incorrect, and there's something there, right? I mean, there obviously, but I have not seen a single poll of people's opinion, Republicans or Democrats, that listed foreign policy or Ukraine or anything among their top 10 voting priorities for the election.
Oh, I agree.
And it's a truism. Now, there is a vocal minority of the MAGA people, very influential online and elsewhere. And it appears that Trump Jr. is one of them, right? So that there is something there. But I think it's always important to remember that if Trump turned around tomorrow and said, we have always been at war with Eurasia, Russia, right? That the majority of the MAGA people would flip on a dime. Sorry. I mean, the ones out there watching this show, I'm not talking about you, right? Because I know there's some MAGA people out there watching this. And
of course.
Yeah, okay, we don't agree with you on everything. I certainly don't. But be honest that you do not represent the average American or even the average Trump supporter. You're a little step up above. You like to be informed about the rest of the world and care about it. And that is not the perspective that most Americans, when they go to vote. Sorry.
That's true. I would agree with that assessment for sure about the average American.
We shouldn't project. We all care about this as one of the most important things on our lives, but let's not project our feelings about this onto an average voter unless there's some serious polling information to back it up.
Yeah, I think a lot of these people that we're looking at on the screen there, including the one that's not European, Justin Trudeau, I think they're all hoping that the Trump world gets expelled from Washington. Period.
Yeah, what I see there is a vampire's ball.
Yeah, this is not great. I mean, I attended CPAC 2 weeks ago. Georgia Maloney, she's hidden back there next to Justin Trudeau.
Trying to hide.
She delivered a video speech. You know, she was invited to speak ahead of Donald Trump. Olaf Scholz, if you look at the positioning of the seats at the table, literally at the table, Mark, Olaf Scholz is on his way out as chancellor. He's got a number of days left, right? They put him off. You know, the heads of the table were Macron and Starmer and Zelensky, and Scholz. I mean, look, he wasn't even in the camera view. They put him off to the side. Like the Germans, even the new guy that's coming in, Merz, he's also Olaf Scholz.
He's more of a hawk on Ukraine, much more of a hawk than Scholz.
So, I mean, if this message gets out there to the bulk of the MAGA crowd that might be listening, that are more the typical MAGA crowd, let this be their thing, that they understand that if they care about America first, truly, then you don't want American boots on the ground. If you don't want that, then you should tell the Europeans, if this is your war, you want to continue this war, then have at it. You guys should have at it. If this is what you want, spend your money, spend your tax dollars, go have expensive gas prices, go have this war. If this is what you want, you guys have at it. We got our own internal problems to fix.
But Article 5! Article 5!
All right, Mark.
Yes, always appreciate it.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's always a blast, guys.
Always fun with you. And it's a lot of like hard truths, right, that people won't talk about. But so we're a little cynical and funny about it. But, you know, it is what it is. This is the political landscape we're in. And so takeaway is, this doesn't change anything, is what I understand, Mark. This doesn't change anything. SMO goes on.
It changes things, but not as much as people might. Probably not as much as people might think.
Yeah, SMO is going to go on, is what I see. So, I mean, until a deal is signed.
But also, Russia and the United States are going to get closer.
They are.
I think
so. That's also probably true. Yeah. And who knows, right? Anything could happen, right? And maybe the war will end, and I don't think so. But, you know, anything's... I don't hope. Right, I don't do hope, but
I think Zelensky's days are numbered, but we'll see. All right,
I just would be more afraid that whoever replaced him would be worse and far more competent.
That can always
Not
happen.
throw tantrums in the Oval Office.
The history of revolution makes that clear. But anyway, all right. Not that this would be a revolution. Mark Sleboda is an international relations and security analyst. You can follow Mark on Twitter at MarkSleboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda, and find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Guys.